Folks, I still don't really know what the hell Bitcoin is. I will be very honest with you, but I've brought in an expert to explain all of it, and it also happens to be Nashville, that's the home to the Bitcoin 2024 conference, bringing in thousands of people to Nashville to talk all about Bitcoin. So what a better time to bring in actually a longtime friend of mine, Natalie Brunell, Coin Stories podcast host, and she joins me now. Natalie, so Bitcoin has taken over Nashville, which is exciting for us, even if we don't know what Bitcoin is. So I want to get into what it actually is and have you explain why you're so passionate about it, because I know that you are, and there's so many patriots that are. But first, I have to start off with kind of what attracted a lot of people like me to the idea of it, at least while it's in Nashville. It's that Donald Trump is going to be speaking at the conference on Saturday. And that's a big deal for a presidential candidate, for Donald Trump to be speaking there. And I actually wouldn't have thought that the Bitcoin audience would be, a mega crowd, but maybe things are changing. Explain that dynamic to me.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. We're really excited to be here. And yes, political forces are now starting to embrace Bitcoin on all sides of the political spectrum, which is really exciting. RFK Jr. is here as well. And really, this is a movement for economic empowerment. So many people in this country feel disenfranchised. They feel like they've been working harder and harder, but their money buys them less. And especially young people, they feel like they can't afford the things that maybe for previous generations were a little bit easier on one wage. And so this is about bringing people together to learn about Bitcoin. And now there are major candidates who are not just talking about Bitcoin, they're literally naming one specific cryptocurrency, embracing it, and talking about protecting the right to self-custody, and also potentially even creating a Bitcoin strategic reserve for the federal government. There's talks that maybe the government's gonna buy some Bitcoin so that we can fix some of our debt issues, because economic empowerment is so important, whether you're talking about an individual, a company, or a nation.
So explain that to me, why it would be good if the government bought Bitcoin, because I thought the whole premise was to keep the government out of money.
Well, that's true, but the government is people, right? And I think what we're passionate about with Bitcoin is holding people accountable, shrinking the size of government and returning the power to the people through free markets and competition. Right now, we don't really have capitalism in this country. We have crony capitalism. And that's partially because central banks issue the currency and they basically have the power. Power concentrates economically and then politically as well. And then we have a system where the people who are closest to the money printer benefit the most. The big corporations that are they're able to get easy loans, cheap credit, and continue to finance things like buying back shares of stock, right? And ballooning when they have no real revenue and have deteriorating products and services. The people that have special interest groups. I mean, this is why we have big pharma, big food, big agriculture, big tech, big oil. Because when you have a centralized form of money, it tends to create monopolies. And again, that's not really natural in capitalism. Capitalism is about capital, saving, deferring your consumption so that you can save and invest in something productive in the future. And our country has not been doing that. We have been consuming far more than we produce. And then we wonder, why is our working class so frustrated and not able to afford the things that they once could? A home, retirement, education, healthcare. So they need to be economically empowered. And our system won't do that, because in order to keep things sustainable, we have to keep printing money. We have to go further and further into debt. And the one thing we need is for people to have the chance to save for their futures. And Bitcoin is the hardest money that has ever been invented. Well, it's been engineered, basically, money perfected. It's absolutely scarce, and it's decentralized so that no one has the power over the currency to be able to manipulate it and steal from anyone else.
So, and forgive me because I'm still trying to wrap my head around Bitcoin.
Yeah.
I understand that money and the way money is printed, like the piece of paper or the coins, it feels like that's also a figment of our imagination, and I understand that premise. But with a Bitcoin, does it all exist on the internet? Is it a tangible thing? But then if it exists on the internet, people like me are like, okay, well, last week we had a CrowdStrike update that grounded flights. And so I'm thinking, okay, so if Bitcoin exists in the cloud or on the internet and we have a cyber attack or our money is shut down, then what happens to the Bitcoin owners? Are they able to access their money? How do they get around something like that?
So I love these questions because I had all of them. I was the biggest skeptic of Bitcoin. I started in 2017 and I thought because it's digital, it can be hacked. It inherently can be hacked.
Yeah.
It could go to zero. I could lose it. But the thing I didn't realize is the power of networks. Bitcoin is a decentralized network. There is no central point of failure. So when you talk about something like CrowdStrike, that was centralized servers. Those are companies. There are inherent weaknesses when you have centralized power. And whether that's a company or an institution, a nation state, you have points of failure and you have corruptible human beings that run them, right? Corruptible, fallible, sometimes with great intentions. So why not have a network that's distributed around the whole world that no one can control and manipulate? Bitcoin doesn't have a CEO. It's not a company. It is literally a technology network backed by the most incredible computer system in the entire world and energy. And no one can cheat energy. So it creates a fair set of rules that everyone has to play by. And essentially, Bitcoin, I mean, think of it as a ledger, right? I send money to you and you take it from your account, you send it to someone else. We're all dealing in electronic ledgers when it comes to our banking system. Those banks control those ledgers. Our government controls its ledger. They're $35 trillion in debt. Bitcoin is a ledger that's distributed around the whole globe that all of us have access to. And when you're purchasing Bitcoin, you're essentially purchasing a spot on that ledger. And all of us can verify it. No one has a special advantage. And all of us can finally exchange value with one another in a really fair and transparent way where, again, the most important thing is no one can manipulate it. No one can co-opt it. No one can inflate away your savings. And that ledger is immutable and no one can change it because it's so distributed and decentralized.
So I'm from South Dakota. Could I go and buy a home in South Dakota, in rural South Dakota, with Bitcoin today?
There are probably people that would love to sell you their home for Bitcoin so that they can
In rural
continue to
South Dakota.
accumulate. There are Bitcoiners everywhere. I mean, you would be surprised. There are Bitcoiners in so many developing countries.
Does the bank recognize Bitcoin, though?
Well,
Can you get a mortgage on Bitcoin?
So there are a ton of companies that will allow you to take out loans against your Bitcoin. So yes, people are even taking out loans against their Bitcoin and purchasing a home. It's really important today to kind of short the currency, which is depreciating consistently, and go long, hard, scarce assets. And the hardest and the most scarce is Bitcoin. It's harder and scarcer than homes, than equities, than gold. And so it's really the best investment that you can make for your future because there will only ever be 21 million Bitcoin. They're infinitely divisible. So you don't have to purchase a whole Bitcoin. You could purchase Satoshis. But again, it's really about economic empowerment.
What? A Satoshi?
A Satoshi, yeah. A Satoshi is 1/100 millionth of a Bitcoin. So today—
What's the Dogecoin or whatever? What is that?
So there are a lot of other cryptocurrencies out there. They came after Bitcoin. I don't personally invest in them. I had to go through a long process of learning why they're so different. But none of them have the properties that could withstand being a global money like Bitcoin. They have to make trade-offs. And so these other blockchains, they might be faster or they might have more functionality in the form of smart contracts. But to me, I see a lot of risk because when you remove the energy component or you remove something like the ability to secure the blockchain through this competition for energy, which is the proof of work consensus mechanism, and we could go into the weeds with that. But you basically have to introduce governance. And so a lot of these tokens, they rely on a consensus mechanism known as proof of stake, where the people with the most coins get to validate and verify the ledger. Well, so the people who have more coins have an advantage, right? And that's kind of like our current system. I don't want that. I want a system where it's fair competition for everyone. The rules are not rigged. They're fair for everyone to contribute value and be able to expend resources to try to mine and compete for Bitcoin. And I think that will create a base layer for economic activity around the world where we can actually compete for value, create value again. Right now, someone said this on my show recently, it was brilliant. A lot of people are trying to make money, they're not trying to create value.
Okay.
And capitalism, I think, is about creating value. And in a capitalistic environment, through technology, it's actually deflationary. Prices should be falling. Why aren't they? People really need to start to question that. Why are you working harder and harder for less? Why is the home that your parents purchased in 1970 now millions of dollars, and you on maybe a great salary from your job with your degree from a good college, you can't afford that same house? people need to start asking why. The reason is because we've printed so much money, and that money has pooled with a small amount of people. We have increased the money supply annualized about 7% a year. So if you're not getting a raise of 8 to 10% every year, you are drowning through inflation. We finally started talking about inflation after the pandemic, right? People understand CPI, it went from 2% to 9%. But that is not indicative of the real inflation rate. People know that. They're not stupid. They're going to the grocery store. They're seeing what things cost. It's not 9%. Sometimes it's 100, 200%, right? What is causing it? It is a monetary phenomenon. They are increasing the supply of money. And for the most part, it's pooling in assets. Who owns assets? Wealthy people, right? And there's downstream effects to that. And so working class people are continually feeling like they're treading water because inflation is wage deflation and they can't keep up with the pace of it. So we need a currency that's deflationary, which is Bitcoin. We need a currency that appreciates in value, but that the supply cannot be inflated.
Okay. I mean, I think people can understand that at a base level. They understand the risks of inflation. I think a lot of people are still rather confused or nervous about Bitcoin. And just in a simple way, does the government tax your Bitcoin?
So it's a form of property. So if you sell it, just like a house, you will have short or long-term capital gains. But most of us don't want to sell our Bitcoin. I will spend a little bit here and there because I want to support Bitcoin businesses, and I'll travel sometimes and people will accept Bitcoin and I'll send, Satoshis. But for the most part, it is my savings technology. It is the way that I'm saving for my future because I've lost hope in the current system being able to provide for me and being able to retire, being able to own a home. I only see hope in economically empowering myself through Bitcoin.
But if people start getting paid in Bitcoin, the government would have to tax that.
Well, so right now, there's some legislation being put forth by Bitcoin politicians like Senator Lummis who say that under a certain threshold, it should not be taxed, so that it will encourage use as a currency. But again, right now, for the most part, especially in the Western world and in the US, it's viewed as a store of value and as a form of property. So it is taxed. It can make taxes sometimes very complicated.
Yeah, I don't even know how to even begin with taxing Bitcoin and
Yeah, so it would be great if we had, let's say, because other countries have this. Some other countries have it where you can spend up to a certain amount of Bitcoin, and that is not taxed. And then after that threshold, you have to pay capital gains tax.
Why do Bitcoin folks love Puerto Rico so much?
I think because of the low taxes. I think just like so many people have flocked to states like Texas and Florida, it's just because they feel like the government should not take from them as much as they are. And there is just a huge movement, again, to hold the government accountable because so many people, regardless of what your politics are, you look and you see that politicians, they continue to sort of fail up. They spend a ton of money. They're not accountable for the decisions, even if some of them destroy the cities that they're representing, but they maintain, a tenure in office of 40, 50 years and retire with a nice pension if they ever retire. People are frustrated by that, understandably. There's nothing that really incentivizes them to have to compete and, again, create value. And so I think that if we were able to shrink the government and remove the power to issue the currency, and we distributed that around the world and created a fair competition, I think that it would help us have a resurgence of not just the working class, but really the American dream. My family came here for the American dream from Eastern Europe, and they have felt that it has been dying over the last 2 decades because people don't have access to opportunity in the way that they once did. Hardworking people are working and not seeing any payoff, and that will frustrate even the best of people.
No, totally understandable, and we're obviously in line on that. I think it's just the concept of it people are still, they're warming up to. But Donald Trump is going to be speaking to the conference, which for a lot of people is interesting. I mean, you've got somebody who's a real estate mogul, somebody who's a billionaire. And I know he's gotten into the NFT game, which I want to ask you about because I think that's kind of not a thing anymore. But him speaking, will it be a warm reception from the attendees, or what do you think the split will be of people that are excited to hear the former president speak? There's
a total mix. There are Bitcoiners that are so excited about this because, again, it means the legitimization of Bitcoin as an asset. And they do see the strategic advantages that the United States would have embracing Bitcoin as a leader of technology, as a leader in innovation, to help entrepreneurship in this industry thrive. It provides jobs. It helps us become a leader in energy as well as in cybersecurity. So I think that there are a lot of people that think that this is one of the best things that America can do. And then there are a lot of Bitcoiners who are skeptical of all politicians. They're cautiously optimistic, but they think that, again, the power needs to be removed from state actors and it needs to be distributed to us, the people, to interact with each other freely through a tool like Bitcoin. And so, maybe they're there kind of curious, but wondering if he really understands Bitcoin. And I think all of us are just waiting to see when America steps up and understands that a system that is built on debt is not sustainable and it hurts everyone. A few people benefit at the start, but over the long run, that game, which is so rigged at its core, hurts everyone and sometimes ends in violent revolutions and people end up overthrowing the government. I don't want it to lead to that. I'm so grateful that we are at this inflection point where we have this tool and technology that sort of came at the perfect time and it's parallel to our current fiat system and people can peacefully opt in one Satoshi at a time and empower themselves. Everything is getting cheaper in terms of Bitcoin.
Okay.
Houses are dropping, your grocery bill's dropping, and I now have hope for the future because of Bitcoin.
Okay. Just to go back to the Donald Trump of it all, I saw that the conference also invited Vice President Kamala Harris to speak, and she declined or she didn't respond.
Yes.
And then I also saw that you made a post the other day that what it feels like when you've got the Elon Musks, Peter Thiels of the world, who are very much, I don't know necessarily in the Trump camp, although Elon Musk is, but you've got some Silicon Valley folks that seem to be moving over, maybe not to the Republican side, but more so to the Trump side. And then the Wall Street folks, the typical corporate America folks, they are gravitating, which I believe they always have, towards maybe the Democrat establishment. Explain that to me and what you guys are seeing in that industry and maybe how it might be changing a little bit.
Well, it has been interesting to watch. Certainly the technologists are moving in the way of Bitcoin. They want fair regulation. They want a framework where they can work within to sort of allow the industry to flourish. They don't want to see it going overseas. People are really passionate about Bitcoin, especially those who understand it and work in the space. And then on the flip side, you're absolutely right. I think a lot of people are questioning the identities of these political parties because how can you, these big bankers, the government's supposed to hold them accountable, right? They're not supposed to be best friends with the big Wall Street firms who, by the way, they bail out. They're the first ones to say, tax them, tax the wealthy. And then they're the first ones to run and say, we need to bail them out because it's so systemically important. And I think a lot of people have lost trust in that because if you're representing the common person, the cops, the fire people, the nurses, the teachers, how are you also getting all your financing from the big banks that so many people have felt have contributed to sort of this wealth concentration in our country? And for me, I look at it now because of my Bitcoin lens and I say, it's just the incentives and the money that's completely broken. I don't think that people are inherently bad. In fact, I actually am a believer that most people are good, including the people that try to run and fix the things in our country. But you can't fix something where power, especially economic power, is so concentrated. Those people will want to maintain that power. And so it's funny because there's this economist that said this in probably the 1980s, Friedrich Hayek. He said, you will never take the power away from government unless you introduce something in a sly, roundabout way that they just cannot stop. And that's incredibly exciting about Bitcoin because it is sort of this sly, roundabout thing that it's an example of free speech. It's a form of property. Our government is rooted in property rights, and it's slowly making its way from bottom up. It's not imposed on us top down. It's a working class phenomenon that all of us are starting to embrace, and that's awesome. That's where the power should be. It should be with the people. It should be decentralized like our government was meant to be.
I think people are excited about it. Still probably some people are still confused about it, including myself. But I have to ask you, I mean, when I met you, you were doing journalism and then you switched over to Bitcoin, which is still, I mean, you're still obviously doing a form of journalism in that. But I know a lot of people that got in the door on Bitcoin early, they made a lot of money and they made a lot of money fast. And when we say money, that's so weird to me because I still believe they're making dollars and not Bitcoin because not everything accepts Bitcoin as payment. Explain to me how so many people got so rich off Bitcoin.
Well,
and if they're rich in dollars or if they're rich in internet money.
So, by the way, I get it, right? Because we live in a system of dollars. 90% of global transactions happen in the dollar. We are the global reserve currency. So People price everything in dollars. But dollars were not actually always the global reserve currency. Before that, it was the British pound sterling. Before that, it was gold that was really the currency of the world. And so things change. And Bitcoin is slowly going through the process of monetization. First, it becomes a store of value. Then it's used as a medium of exchange. And then finally, I think more and more things will be priced in Bitcoin. So within that framework within the current system of dollars. But people who started out in Bitcoin early, and I wish I was one of them, 2011, 12, 13, when Bitcoin barely had a price. 2011, the first Bitcoin exchange happened for 2 pizzas for 10,000 Bitcoin. I mean, that's worth billions of dollars now. And
So see, I don't get that. How does that now worth billions of dollars when you started out with something and you just created it basically out of thin air, and then you said, this is Bitcoin, it's worth this, it's decentralized. I bought, 2 pieces for 10,000, but now it's worth billions. In the most simple way possible, explain to me how that even works.
Okay, so Bitcoin was created as an open source software. Anyone can run this software. And it literally grew organically from 1 person to 2 to 5 to 10. It spread, and it things like this take on a network effect, kind of like websites that we're familiar with, right? Facebook has a strong network effect. Wikipedia has a strong network effect. Google has a strong network effect. You can create a competitor, but it will be very hard for you to dethrone those because everyone uses them, right? Everyone's familiar with it. Well, Bitcoin gained that as well. It was just operating on its own within first a cypherpunk community, and it expanded wider, and then investors started to come in. And yes, eventually it was starting to be priced in Bitcoin. People made exchanges with Bitcoin, and they decided to exchange their physical US dollars for the Bitcoin. So it started to have a price. And at first it started minuscule, pennies. And now it's grown to $60,000 per Bitcoin. And it will continue. If you zoom out at the logarithmic price chart of Bitcoin in US dollars, of course it has some volatility in the short run. But when you look at that chart, it is remarkable because it is up only. Whereas if you look at the dollar chart of its purchasing power, it's down only. The inflation rate of 2% that they're trying to get back to, they should really change that to the rate that they're going to devalue it. It's every single year your currency is worth at least 2% less, but I see it as 7 to 10% because that's how fast they're expanding the money supply. So right now things, yes, they're going to be increasingly priced in Bitcoin and in euro and in yen. You can pull up any of those charts, but in the future, maybe there will be a day, maybe 100 years from now, where everything is priced in Satoshis.
What a day that will be, and I will still not understand any of it.
You will.
And I will still be like Bob Menendez with my gold bars because that just feels safer to me. But I get it, and I get that it's a movement, and I get people are really excited about it. Thousands of people in Nashville excited about it.
Tens of thousands. Yeah.
Tens of thousands excited about it. So I will not be going to Nashville this weekend because that sounds like a nightmare. But I hope, I don't know if the bars here accept Bitcoin, by the way, so good luck. But it'll be interesting. And I'm excited that Donald Trump's getting involved in it. I'm excited that this is becoming more mainstream for people to take part in. And thank you for doing your best to explain it to me. I'm sure other people understand it much better than I do. I'm still working through the process of understanding it, but I understand it better now that you've been here. So thank you, and welcome to Nashville.
Well, I appreciate that. And thank you for being curious about it, because that's the first step. Like I said, I was so skeptical and dismissive, and I thought it was a total scam. And then I went on a journey that took years, and I realized that this is really the best chance we have in the future of economically empowering the average person. And that brings me a lot of hope. It makes me feel really positive at a time when I was starting to feel like there is not a lot of hope in the future.
Well, that's exciting for a lot of people. And it's exciting that this is becoming more popular and people are talking about it more. So I'm excited about that, and I'm excited for you guys to be in Nashville. Thanks for bringing it to Nashville, because we could use, the economic stimulus of that. Not the traffic, but the stimulus of it. And we're excited to have you. So have a great time in Nashville. I look forward to seeing, the clips of Donald Trump's speech and the reception that he'll get. Again, Vice President Kamala Harris chose not to be here. Joe Biden chose not to be here. So that says something in my book, that we're welcoming innovation and maybe innovators. So thank you for being here. Thank you for explaining it. And I hope to talk to you soon.
Thank you so much. Yeah, the door's open for everyone. Bitcoin's for everyone.
All right. I love it. All right, folks, that does it for this very special Bitcoin episode of Tomi Lahren is Fearless. I will see you right back here Monday live, 1 p.m. Eastern. But until then, from Nashville, God bless and take care. What's up, guys? Thank you for watching Tomi Lahren is Fearless. If you want more of my hottest takes, must-see conversations, and of course, my final thoughts, click here and make sure you subscribe here so you'll never miss a beat. I'll be here every weekday, and I hope you'll join me.